614 Productions presents The Not So Neutral Zone, a podcast for armchair enthusiasts by armchair enthusiasts. Your hosts, Jacob Smith and David Trexler.
The opinions expressed on this show are those of the participants and in no way represent those of any sports league, organization, or their athletes therein. Just our thoughts and opinions. What do you think, Jacob?
It's just like your opinion, man. The first item on our agenda today is to review the 2016-17 seasons, what teams improved the most, which failed to improve, and which teams have the brightest futures.
So I thought maybe we'll look, since NFC won the championship, we'll start with their conference.
Alright.
First team we'll look at is San Francisco 49ers.
The San Francisco 49ers. The future is very bright there in San Francisco now, but in 2016 their future was not very bright.
2-14 and improved to 6-10 with a new quarterback. My personal grade for them, I gave them a D.
Yes, for the 2016 season they get a solid F from me. But their improvement in 2017 and their acquisition of a franchise quarterback really pushes them up.
Something they've been lacking since, I don't know, maybe, to me it's something they lacked since Steve Young.
Yeah, between Young and Kaepernick there wasn't a whole lot, and then the jury's still out on Kaepernick.
Our next one we got, and before I go any further, I think I was stingy on the A's. I gave 3 total and 2 Fs. But
this is the 2016 season?
Well, this is
both
from one to the other. The next team on the list is Chicago Bears, another team that was worst in their division 2 years in a row, 3-13 to 5-11.
3-13 to 5-11. Well, they did improve in some areas. Their defense improved. They, of course, won 2 more games, but their defense improved. And Trubinsky, he might have a bright future. With some development, they got the right coaching staff in there, I believe. I think things are looking up.
I gave those guys a D- because they went from 3-13 with Jay Cutler to a rookie quarterback and got them 5 wins, which the last time the team did any good was Rex Grossman was their quarterback of all guys. A guy that just faded quick.
Well, I mean, there wasn't much there to begin with.
The next team I got is a team that went from the number 5. They were the number 5 seed in 2016 as the number 1 wild card at 11-5 to 3-13. They went from second in their division to 4th. I gave them a D-. That's the Giants.
The Giants really bungled this. They had lots of success in the 2016 season, but their transition to 2017 just didn't work out.
I think the main thing there was Ben McAdoo in 2016 had Tom Coughlin's Giants team, and this year it was his team to bungle, and the whole Eli Apple situation, not Eli Manning, but Eli Apple, their defensive back, was probably one of those guys that just divided the defense and picked them apart.
Yeah, it was very distracting for the team. The team actually allowed up 104 more points in 2017 on defense and scored 64 fewer points on offense. They were just horrendous.
Our next team on the list is, and the way I've got them ranked, I believe, is how they finished the 2017 season according to either record or just that was the first team I came across. Next one, Tampa Bay, 9-7 to 5-11.
Tampa Bay was one of those teams in the offseason that was all hype and then failed to deliver. They simply had the pieces in place and could not execute.
To me, it was just a simple fact that you got Carolina with Ron Rivera, Dan Quinn in Atlanta, and out there in New Orleans, you got Sean Payton. Dirk Cutter just got out-coached by 3 good coaches.
Oh yeah, the NFC South was probably the best division in football this past season. No doubt about it.
Especially with it coming down to the last 2 weeks of the season, which one of the few bright ideas that Roger Goodell had was backloading team schedules with division opponents, so you have to play. If the Colts and the Saints hadn't quit that season, they both went to the Super Bowl. They hadn't quit, keep from being perfect all the way through. We wouldn't have had that good schedule. And I gave those guys a D because their coach just got out coached.
Yeah, definitely.
The next team I gave a C minus to was Arizona. Went from 7-8-1 to 8-8. They stayed the same, but I think it's just because of that no consistent quarterback on the team. Good defensive players like can't ever remember the kid's name, but the Honey Badger.
The Honey Badger, yes.
And Peterson on
Yeah.
defense. Those are two good guys.
Yeah. The funny thing about the Cardinals, their records are very similar from 16 to 17, but the advanced stats really show their woes. They scored 123 points less on offense in the 2017 season than in the 2016 season. It's just not good.
The next team we got, they've been an afterthought for a while. I gave them a D. They went from 8-7-1 to 7-9 was the Washington Redskins. Here's a team with a guy at head coach that I remember this guy when I remember Jay Gruden when he played for the Orlando Predators in arena football. Great player, transitioned to coach. He knows how to win championships, and he's got the experience. I just think bad timing for him getting the team, and who knows with next year.
Yeah, everyone knows about the Kirk Cousins situation at this point. That maybe if they had worked out a long-term deal, maybe things would have been better. But that hanging over the whole season, now you're going to be going into next season with Alex Smith at quarterback. They may try to tag and trade Cousins, which will just be a nightmare if they try that. But it just leaves a lot of things up in the air. I think Jay Gruden's definitely one of those that could be in the hot seat at the end of the 2018 season.
Yeah, that's one of those guys. I think when we get to the AFC side, I'll talk about Jay Gruden a little more on another team. But the next team I gave a D, but I feel like I should have gave them an F just because of their head coach. They had last year is Detroit, 9-7, 2 years in a row, second in the division, which is surprising considering you got Green Bay in that division with you. Detroit, Jim Caldwell to me was never that coach. He got lucky going to a Super Bowl with the Colts just because he had Tony Dungy's team. In Detroit, Jim Schwartz should have never been fired. I don't think it was his fault that the team just collapsed the way it did. But I think they may actually have him a good coach now in Matt Patricia. He's a guy that maybe in a later show we can do this, just kind of pick apart, and if we were owner of a franchise or GM and we had to hire our own coach and coordinators, we can kind of guess. But he's been one of those guys for the last few years, and after we get done with the little records thing here, our next topic is talking about the first year coaches. But I don't know, what do you think about Detroit?
I think Jim Caldwell is definitely one of those. He's one of those bridge guys. If you have a franchise just in complete disarray, you bring in a guy like Jim Caldwell. You bring it in for a year, 2, 3 years. You get the bad contracts out. You get you get rid of the people that are not team players. You change the morale and the culture of the team, and then you dump Caldwell and you get someone that's going to get you where you want to go. But Detroit the future's bright in Detroit as well. Matt Patricia, their offense improved in 2017 over 2016. So maybe with Detroit retaining Jim Bob Cooter, who knows? Who knows where it could go?
I don't know too much about their new defensive coordinator, Paul Pasqualoni, I think is his name. I don't know much about him, so it might be interesting to see what he does.
Yes, definitely with an improved running game and defense, Detroit would be a team to watch out for in the NFC.
Our next team is a former Super Bowl champion team. They went 10-5-1 last year, won their division. This year, they won the West last year, missed the playoffs completely this year because of a stacked NFC playoff picture with that NFC South is Seattle. I gave them a B minus because they slipped, and I think it was you can tell that the absence of Dan Quinn on that team when he left and went to Atlanta kind of took a hit with them, and plus they've got all the talent on offense, but nowhere to go. It's kind of like Pete Carroll just doesn't have that innovative idea anymore, and that Marshawn Lynch deal in the Super Bowl against the Patriots still kind of hanging over them.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how the offensive line is played, and now they've got a new O-line coach.
O-line coach, I know they just hired Brian Schottenheimer for their offensive coordinator, and
They fired Tom Cable as their O-line coach.
Tom Cable's in, I believe, Oakland now. But they got Ken Norton Jr., a great linebacker in his day for the Cowboys as their defense coordinator now. In a situation I still don't agree with that happened out there in Oakland, but Ken Norton's one of those guys. I believe I have him on my list of. Actually, I don't. I don't have him on my list of guys I see being a potential head coach next year. But I think that defense has started to fall apart. They got some great guys. They got Sherman, Thomas. My favorite Seahawk, Cam Chancellor.
Yeah, he's coming off injury, so we'll see how that works out. I just think if this team, if Russell Wilson gets hurt at any point, their season is sunk because there's no quarterback. There's really no other quarterback in the league that I think can do what he does behind the line that he gets. I mean, he's running for his life out there.
Kind of reminds me of the days when Derek Carr was in Carolina. It was just
David Carr.
David, not Derek. I like Derek. I don't know why I thought Derek instead of David. I guess because he's relevant now, but it's just like David Carr was. It was one of those situations, or better yet, it kind of reminds. Watching Russell Wilson this last season play reminded me of in The Longest Yard when Adam Sandler comes off the bench and gets back in the game and the offensive line just quit on him and he's getting murdered. It's like you can't have your quarterback have longevity when that's happening to him. The guy's got a good NFL career, plus now he's got his backup career still going for him.
Yeah. So, I think with some changes, the new offensive coordinator, I think they can really put it together, but the NFC West is going to be absolutely brutal this coming year.
Well, now we go to our next team. This team went from 13-3 as number one in the division to 9-7 and barely missed the playoffs. They were NFC East champs last year. I gave them a C, although I feel like I maybe could have gave them a D or a C minus, is the Cowboys. Here's a team that they could have done what the Patriots did in 2016 when Brady got suspended for 4 games and still went and won the Super Bowl. It was like the team quit as soon as Ezekiel Elliott's suspension started. Nobody around there, it was like they didn't have a backup plan in place for this guy. And, I mean, for once I'm glad that Jerry Jones is actually sticking with the head coach with Garrett. Kind of like he actually knows, I need that one consistent thing. But, I don't know, I think it may be, with Dallas, I think it may be more of a coaching issue than it is a player issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ezekiel Elliott is a great player. I think he's a very talented player. But let's be honest, that Dallas offensive line is really, really good. So I think they definitely could have had more offensive production than they did without Ezekiel Elliott. And it definitely hurt. I think the coaching takes the brunt of the blame. I know Garrett's very much of a player's coach, but you still have to preach that mentality that the team is bigger than the individual.
The thing I like about that with having Garrett as head coach, he was a player for the Cowboys. He may have been Troy Aikman's backup's backup, but he still knows what it takes to get that ring, and he can actually instill that in the players. Hey, look, I've got this ring. Here's what you need to do. Let's move it on.
Yeah, you can definitely preach that that mentality to act like you've been there before, because he has been there before.
Several times. He's probably, I believe, the last, besides the Jones family, I think he may be the last holdover in the organization from their playing days, or from their Super Bowl days. Our next team, the NFC North champions from 2016, Green Bay. They went from 10-6 to 7-9. I gave them a C minus because it was just, I don't know. I think the wrong coaches got the blame for the bad year last year. I think what they should have done is parted ways with McCarthy, bring in a fresh head coach to get a new thing, because Rodgers just doesn't seem like the Rodgers from several years ago.
Definitely. Green Bay, obviously with Rodgers being hurt, that hurt them, but their offensive woes without him were bad. They were bad. I wouldn't want to be Aaron Rodgers' backup, because then you're expected to come in and take over a team that's used to great success.
Kind of like they did when they went from Favre to Rodgers.
Yeah. You don't want to be that guy in that spot. Now, Rodgers obviously delivered in the Favre-Rodgers transition, but now if Rodgers goes down, I don't know. Maybe it's if Rodgers goes down, you already know the game's lost, and there's not that much pressure. But I saw a lot of hate towards Brett Hundley for his performance, and honestly, he's not Rodgers.
That's not the guy that came in for Rodgers in that one game, Week 17, that one year that they traded Seattle, is it? Wasn't his name
Flynn?
Flynn, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, Flynn. Flynn threw 7 touchdowns in one game, I think. He was one of those guys that shares that record.
Okay, now we come to the unfortunate part of our grades in the NFC, because now we've got to pick apart our respective teams. First is Carolina. Number 1, they were the top wild card team this year, number 5 seed in NFC. Last year missed the playoffs after going to the Super Bowl. They went from 6-10 to 11-5. I gave them a B. They would have probably gotten an A had they been in the NFC Championship game. But again, I don't think it was Cam Newton. I saw a thing today pop up on my phone notification. Said one of the things Carolina should be looking at it was the NFL Network, said they should look at their ground game. I have always felt like that when Carolina brings in a new running back, the senior running back starts slacking off, kind of like D'Angelo Williams kind of dropped off with Stewart. Now with McCaffrey, Stewart's dropped off. I think it's time to move on from Stewart. Go out and grab a veteran in free agency to come in and work with McCaffrey.
Yeah, the Panthers' running game actually started picking up towards the later part of the season, partly thanks to their rookie fullback, Alex Armois. I think I'm saying that right. But the biggest story from 2016 to 17 is the defense actually stepped up a lot more. They had about similar points for in 16 and 17, but in 17 they allowed 75 fewer points. So that young defense, after the Super Bowl, they changed out a lot of pieces and tried to get things figured out. Well, the defense is finally hitting its stride, and unfortunately, lost defensive coordinator. These things happen. But
yeah, the new one is Eric Washington. I think he was their defensive line coach.
Yes, he was.
Where's he? Is he going to be a head coach next year, you think?
I think you give him 2 years. The defense, Carolina's defense is not a particularly complicated one, but they have a lot of talent to manage.
just as the one thing that concerns me about their defense is one of the biggest free agents they have on their defensive line, and I always mess up his name every time I say it, but Star Latulele.
You got it that time.
I was impressed when they picked him up because you have him, you had Peppers, you got Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly, and I know none of the defensive backs on the team. Those are the only three guys on defense I really know.
The Panthers always load up a great front seven, and the performance of the front seven really masked the deficiencies in the secondary. But the young corners really stood up. You got Bradbury had a much better year. Just, I think if Carolina could have gotten past the Saints, they beat Minnesota earlier in the season. Maybe they get past Minnesota too. But unfortunately, I think after watching the Super Bowl and all that, I don't think they get past either Philly or New England. I think if they make it to the Super Bowl, they get killed by New England. Cam Newton's just not going to win a shootout with Tom Brady.
Just think how good Carolina could have been had they not transitioned and got rid of arguably one of the best defensive backs they've had in a long time with Josh Norman. That was a big letdown for me. Is it seems like the general manager, whoever it is, always with Carolina, signs somebody to a big contract that should be out the door, kind of like Jordan Gross got the big deal, Peppers left. This guy gets a big deal, this guy leaves. And it's like they constantly are just kind of letting that good player go that should stay.
Yeah, I definitely think Norman should have at least played out the franchise tag in Carolina. But
that was one of those situations where an agent wanted something different than the player, and miscommunication.
Yeah. Well, the biggest cloud of doubt over the 2018 season for Carolina Panthers is the ownership. What's going to happen? We still don't have any real news about who's in the play. Obviously, I'm not a P. Diddy fan on this.
The top names I've heard were the Levine family. Sold their stake in Family Dollar, so they've got that cash laying around. Another one is Bruton Smith. His son, he said if the opportunity ever came up, he would buy the team and let his sons run his interest in it. Felix Sabates, big name in Charlotte, he's kind of gotten interest. Brian France has come up. So you've got all these big-time players in Charlotte area, and I think NFL ownership, especially guys like Mark Davis, Robert Kraft, Dan Snyder, Jerry Jones, the power guys, would welcome somebody that's going to not want to move the team.
Yes, and I think it depends on how much of the share of the team is being sold. But if it's all being sold, I think for sure it breaks the record, which I think was the Buffalo sale. I think it was $2.4 billion. So I'm pretty sure if the shares of the entire team go up for sale, I'm pretty sure we probably break a record there.
Okay, next we move to. Unfortunately, I don't like where our time span is right now in our recording, because it's hitting in the time frame that unfortunately we're talking about the Falcons now. And while everybody sat around and talked about how many football games did you watch this year, I watched very little during the regular season, only because every time I watched a game, if New England was playing or Atlanta was playing, all you would hear is 28-3. Like this is the biggest debacle any team's ever had in the Super Bowl. But yet we forget that one of the supposed greatest quarterbacks of all time, Peyton Manning, in the opening drive on his offensive play in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks, watched the ball sail over his head for a safety. But for the Falcons, they went from 11-5 to 10-6. I gave them a B-, which for them being my favorite team, there was no chance they were getting an A. They were lucky to get a B because, honestly, like we were talking, Saints, Carolina, Atlanta, 3 tough teams, and it was really any of them's division to lose. and it was just who was going to play harder in those last 3 games. They've got their quarterback. They've got great receivers, great running backs. But another team, I know little about the defensive players.
Yeah, Atlanta's 16-17 changeover. They got the Super Bowl hangover a lot easier than Carolina did.
Definitely.
A lot easier. They did have some woes on offense, 187 points less in 2017. But their defense also stepped up. They allowed 91 fewer points in 2017 over 2016. They're definitely not done. Matt Ryan's still in his prime. So there's a lot of the future in Atlanta is, I mean, it's coming up. They still got plenty of years left, and I think they made some good moves. Super Bowl's hosted there. No, I don't think they'll be the home team to play, but
Do you think they've got the best shot that anybody's had going into the season leading up to Super Bowl? Do you think they've got the best chance that any team's had to go Super Bowl? Because in a minute we'll talk about them, but I didn't expect Minnesota to make it as far as they did in the playoffs.
I think going into this previous season, I thought that Minnesota had probably the best chance in a while to play a Super Bowl at home. I didn't think it was a very big chance, and I'm honestly shocked that they made it as far as they did, considering everything else around the team. But Atlanta definitely does have a chance, and as the season, we get through free agency and the draft and all that, I think they could very well have an even better chance to play the Super Bowl at home.
I did miss one point when I was talking about Atlanta. They went from the number 2 seed in the NFC Champs in 2016 to the wild card just barely scraping in.
They're the only team that made the playoffs in the NFC. In the NFC from 2016 to 17, they're the only team that made the playoffs in both years. Very interesting. Parity in the NFC is a lot better than the AFC.
Well, now we get to talk about the third leg of the 3-legged stool in the NFC South, and that's the New Orleans Saints, 7-9 to 11-5. I gave them a B- only because twice this year, their head coach got a little ahead of himself.
Sean Payton is a known dick. It's pretty well known. So, honestly, with the Minneapolis Miracle, I was very happy to see it thrown back in his face.
Especially with it being immediate, because it was one of those things that when you look at them, New Orleans, to me, out of the 6 teams that made the NFC playoffs this year, it was kind of one of those things. Is the NFC South going to be going back to the Super Bowl for the 3rd straight year? Because to me, Carolina could have clicked at the right time. Atlanta could have clicked at the right time. But it just so happened New Orleans, and, with really their, let me see. I'm trying to think of their names. Dennis Allen, wasn't he wasn't he one of the Raiders head coach before Del Rio?
Dennis Allen.
I want to say he was their old head coach.
Yeah, I think he was there.
But now we get to talk about the 3 biggest surprises in the NFC for me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
First is a team that went from 4-12 in 2016 to 11-5 this year, and wound up being the number 3 seed, surprisingly to me, is the Rams. I gave them a B+ because I didn't even expect them to be even in playoff conversation for a wild card. And what McVay, what he's done with that team, and I guess it's no surprise how good the team's done because of who their defensive coordinator is. They got Wade Phillips. This guy, that should show everybody who beat the Panthers in the Super Bowl. It was Wade Phillips.
Yeah, put together one of the best defenses of all time. So, I mean, it's really to tell. Everyone has talked about Jared Goff and that offense, and that offense was amazing. The Rams put up 254 more points in 2017 than 2016. But that's not the whole story. The defense allowed 65 fewer points. Remember, this is over 16 games, so they put up a lot of points and allowed a lot fewer points, and that translated into 7 more wins.
They did. They just surprised me, but with a guy I feel like is not head coach material, but a great coordinator, is Wade Phillips. Kind of like Carolina. I like they finally went out and got them an established offensive coordinator, not somebody who was a position player or coach and moved up. To me, Wade Phillips is one of those guys that put him in charge of your defense. Like what I was saying earlier about Matt Patricia being one of those guys on my head coach list. Wade Phillips is on a short list of maybe 3 guys I would hire as my defensive coordinator. The other 2, I don't really have anybody solid out there. Maybe Dick LeBeau would be one to bring in as, or Dom Capers. If you're going to start a franchise, Dom Capers knows how to get you in the door. Look at the 2 franchises he head coached as the initial and what he did with them.
And you got to think about that Rams defense. Sure, there's talent there, but how many superstars are there? You got, Aaron Donald there in the middle?
I know nobody on their defense.
And then I can't really name anyone else either. It's Aaron Donald and his band of merry men.
Now we're on to our another surprise team. I gave them a B. They went from 8-8 and essentially almost 1 game short of being the first team to play in their stadium for the Super Bowl. Minnesota Vikings with who at quarterback? A cast of it was almost like a cast of like Minnesota was the land of misfit toys when it come to quarterbacks.
Yeah, go through, so many different questions. All 3 quarterbacks are free agents. So, I mean, who would you, out of the 3, who do you think they need to roll with going into 2018?
Let's see, who did they have? Bradford,
Keenum, and Bridgewater. I think you have to roll with Case Keenum. He's the guy that was there on the stretch. Sure, he's probably still backup material, but I think you have to roll with him.
Yeah, I don't think between the 3 of them, Bridgewater, I don't think he's been the same since that game against the I think it was the Rams whenever Greg Williams was their defense coordinator. He hadn't been the same since then, and Bradford, he's so unpredictable because of his knee. But Keenum's like the one of the 3 that's been healthy, clear, and a good one to roll with.
Yeah, I think Brad has the most talent. It's just staying healthy. He can't stay healthy. And Minnesota's 2017 run was really a balanced run. Maybe it was the improved performance on the offensive side of the ball affecting the defense, but they both scored 55 more points and allowed 55 fewer points. Very balanced improvement by them.
Now we get to talk about another team that made a big surprise, and they were probably the most surprising team of 2017. 7-9 and the worst team in their division to best in the entire NFC East, the Eagles. Here's a team that I know I was one of them. As soon as Carson Wentz went down, I was like, there's their season. They're done. They're not going to make it. They slide into the playoffs, get that number 1 seed, and it's like, okay, they're playing the Falcons. The Falcons are going to crush them. Minnesota's going to crush them. New England's going to crush them. It was like Ertz said during the parade. this is for our doubters. They shocked me completely as they were. It was like the ultimate underdog story, and I've never seen anybody go into a Super Bowl except the Giants and pretty much own Bill Belichick and Tom Brady's Patriots team.
Yeah, the Giants' '07 run and this run really parody each other. They were both underdogs for all the games in the playoffs, and neither team was believed to have a chance. Now, obviously, with Wentz going down, what was it? 4 games left to go in the season.
I believe so.
You know, at least they had an established backup. I think that goes to show how much an established backup can help. Think about Green Bay if they had an established backup that could come in and manage and win a game, how they would probably be in the playoffs. But I think Foles can be more than that. He's 29, so he's still got plenty of career ahead of him. I think he definitely gets traded this offseason while his stock is high. But, he should never have to buy a beer in the city of Philadelphia ever again.
Now we get to go to that conference that not many people want to talk about because it pretty much seems like an essential one-team thing. And I thought about this after the Super Bowl. A lot of people said, I'm tired of seeing the Patriots in the playoffs. I'm tired of seeing them in the Super Bowl. But a lot of people forget that there for a long stretch, like 13 years, the NFC owned every AFC team that came in. With the exception of, there's one team that these guys haven't been to a championship in the modern Super Bowl era, is our first team on the list, the Cleveland Browns.
Oh.
I gave them an automatic F. There was no chance of even considering it from another grade. 1-31 in 2 seasons. But the one thing I'm happy about is Jimmy Haslam did one thing that no other owner of that team's done since they were reestablished. He kept his head coach. He still got that faith in Hugh Jackson, which I don't think Hugh Jackson was a bad deal, but I think it's just that the team has not had really any quarterback except Brady Quinn in the new rebooted Cleveland's team that wanted to play in that city. It's just like everybody else is like, wait a minute, I'm going to Cleveland. Yeah, it's time to retire.
Yeah, and the 2016 run where they went 1-15, and everyone's like, well, a new head coach. After that offseason, I'm like, yes, keep Hugh Jackson. I just don't think you can let a coach not win a single game in the NFL and keep him. I don't agree with firing, the head coaches they had before after 1 or 2 seasons. But those head coaches were getting a few wins at least. I just don't think you can keep Hugh on a 0-win performance. The '08 Detroit Lions team, their head coach was out the door on Monday morning after the last game of the season. So they're just... I think this offseason they finally take a quarterback with that number 1 pick, because their previous picks have all been in the 20s. Actually, all of them at 22.
Including the guy that I consider to be on my Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks that aren't in the league for bad play, not because of public relations nightmare.
Yeah, if he was any good, he would still be in the league.
Now our next team is, even though their mascot's a horse, they're the elephant in the room right now with what happened this week with the Indianapolis Colts. A definite F. 8-8 to 4-12, and just right here, a notification that Leslie Frazier interviewed for the job today.
Please don't.
That's one of those things. Go out there and get one of these guys I got on my list, whether it be Jim Schwartz, defense coordinator in Philly, Joe DeCamillis, who I've always liked as special teams coordinator at Houston. Brian Schottenheimer, Seattle offensive coordinator. He could be, even if it's just a transition, grab him. Two more offensive coordinators are Jim Bob Cooter up in Detroit or Frank Reich in Philly. I think he interviewed for the job. And your guy, the one you were talking about from Kansas City.
Taub. Yeah, definitely. I just don't think I've seen a team screwed over quite like they were. They've already had, I think they had 3 assistants already hired. They say they're going to retain them, but I think what they need to do, what they need to do is to go out there, get either young hotshot
John Fox.
or a John Fox type, one of these old established head coaches, say, you're here for a year, basically. Go get John Fox for a year. You at least know the team's not going to fall off a cliff in the meantime. You know? And maybe he can put something together, but then this time next year, you're putting together your staff. I don't like throwing away a season, especially if Andrew Luck's going to be back.
It wouldn't be the first time the Colts threw away a season like when they drafted Luck.
That's true. But I don't like throwing away a season, but I think what McDaniels did to them really hurts their chances.
I thought about, because I really want to do the next segment too, but just kind of skipping over a couple teams because there's some not really anything to note to talk about with them, but 2 teams I gave a D- to were the Jets, Houston. I gave Denver a D because of that quarterback fiasco they're having. Another team that Nick Foles might flourish on would be there. I mean, other than the guys they had around Peyton Manning on that offense, didn't really hit on much. Then you got Baltimore. I gave those guys a C because they just, I don't know, something was missing from that team that they didn't have.
Like the talent's there, it's just the passion is not. I think John Harbaugh's days there are getting numbered.
Now our next team, I gave a D to. Our good buddy Jordan, I don't know how much he'll like us talking about these guys, but Cincinnati. I feel like Marvin Lewis got an extension because Hugh Jackson was retained by Cleveland and Jay Gruden was retained by Washington. If either one of those 2 guys would have been fired, they'd been the next head coach of the Bengals.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. It felt like it was the goodbye run, those last couple games for them. You know, they won their last 2. They beat Baltimore in the last game of the season to get Buffalo into the playoffs. But it felt like a goodbye tour for Marvin Lewis. And then, a week after the season ended, he gets an extension. So I think they should have just went ahead and moved on and gone after one of these hot new coordinators up and coming and really helped out Dalton.
I think if Jackson or Jay Gruden, either one get fired at the end of the 2018 season, Lewis will move into the front office and they'll be the new head coach because they've got the quarterback in Dalton, they've got a great receiver in Green, and it's just Dalton's gave that team something they didn't even have when they had Carson Palmer, and that was a consistent quarterback that played real good. I was excited when they picked him up because it was a new fresh face.
Well, McCarron is probably hitting the free agency market. Whether it's a restricted or unrestricted free agent, that depends on his grievance hearing, which I believe is in early March.
That's another thing that I'm still not high on is A.J. McCarron. I'm not sold on him because he came out of that Alabama system, Nick Saban. Other than guys like Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, neither one won a Heisman, but yet they were able to come out of that supposed great football conference in college and make a career of it. Cam Newton's the only other guy to come out of that one with a Heisman and actually do something with his team. Now next, a couple of these teams I definitely want to hit on because of stuff, but Miami, D-.
Getting some feedback. Maybe it's my headphones. We cut this out.
But with Miami, they pretty much scraped the barrel with Jay Cutler. They need a quarterback, which they haven't had since Dan Marino, which tells you something that they haven't had a good quarterback since pretty much the Browns were brought back.
Yeah, Miami is needing to make some moves. Now, I'll leave it up to y'all to decide whether or not Tannehill is the answer. I do not believe he is. I think he's one of those guys just below Dalton, where he's not really your franchise guy. He's not playing at a high enough level consistently enough to put you in competition. But the big question is, who do they even try to get?
Really nobody.
I don't think they have the cap space to really bid on some of these guys. And there's just not a whole lot trustworthy in the draft.
Now the next team is those guys right there, the Chargers. C-, because one, they traded Eli Manning after they drafted him. Then they trade Drew Brees because his shoulder's done. They've got Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is one of those guys that has never impressed me. He had a lot of talent on a 14-2 team and did nothing.
Yeah, the Chargers get a solid F in my book, just simply because of how they handled the move from San Diego. You know, in 2016, it was just kind of the big F San Diego campaign. They had a horrible year, and then they're like, well, we're going to have this one last vote on stadium funding, and then it fails miserably because they basically told everyone to go F themselves. And, they went 5-11, and then they move, and they're playing in a soccer stadium, and then they can't even make the playoffs. They were right on the verge of it, but only thing LA is going to care about is if you win, and if the Rams keep winning, the Chargers are going to keep playing second fiddle. They're probably not even in the top 5 most popular teams in LA.
They're the cousin Oliver of pretty much Los Angeles, with the exception of maybe the Raiders and Rams before they moved. It's just the ownership of the Chargers have always been one of those teams that you wonder what they're thinking. Why are they getting rid of this guy? Why are they keeping this guy? I mean, Eric Weddle, I liked him. But the way they did him before they moved, and he went to Baltimore, he's enjoying himself again.
The soccer team that plays in that stadium that the Chargers are sharing may be more popular in LA than the Chargers are.
Oh yeah, the Galaxy, that's my soccer team. Yeah, they're definitely within the top 3. I mean, most of the teams in that city now are relevant. The Kings in NHL, they're doing good. You got the Lakers with their fiasco.
Ball drama.
Yeah. Worse than the Kardashian drama. You got the Clippers and their deal. They're good again. But now the Chargers are just like, they're like the kid nobody wants at the party.
I think they should have stayed in San Diego, been the big fish in the little pond, instead of trying to be a little fish in a big pond. They're just going to get lost in the noise.
Now our next team we just talked about, I gave them a D- because of how they dropped off so drastic. From 12-4 to 6-10, the Raiders. They finally have that one component they were missing. a head coach. They got a good quarterback. I don't know what's going on in the backfield with Marshawn Lynch, but they finally got John Gruden at the helm, so that's a good thing for them.
Yeah, and that's their 2017 season. On paper, it looks like they had like bad injuries, like they had a quarterback go down. They had a point drop on offense, similar to like Green Bay, but Carr was healthy all year. Or he missed one game, didn't he?
I believe.
I think he missed one game, but he's healthy for most of the year, and they just put up a bad performance. The big questions with them is how well's Gruden going to do after being in the booth for how many ever years he's been in there.
The thing that helps him is on his Gruden quarterback camp or whatever it was called. He actually sat down with David Carr or Derek Carr. Derek Carr. I'm getting mixed up again. They got the good Carr, not the bad one. But Derek sat down with him and they had a good conversation. He's got him a quarterback. Now all he's got to do is get the defensive pieces in, and he'll be good. Kind of shocking, not as shocking as the next team on the list. Buffalo. First time in almost 20 years these guys get in the playoffs. Yeah, they drew a bad card, pretty much. I mean, they drew the Jaguars as their first opponent. Not the best team this year to go up against. I would have rather went up against New England as my first playoff opponent versus that Jacksonville team. Just, it was more or less a battle of which team was hungrier to win in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they had to go from playing in Buffalo to down in Jacksonville. I know it's not summer and it's not that hot, but it's still quite warm, not something they're used to. I think that really helps Jacksonville late in the season, you know. And then obviously the next week they went on and beat Pittsburgh. But that was a tough draw for Buffalo.
Next up, we got Tennessee. Same record 2 years in a row, but I said B minus on them because it was pretty much for their head coach. You have to win the Super Bowl or you're fired. It was pretty much given. He could have made it to the Super Bowl and lost like Jeff Fisher did, and he's still been out the door.
Yeah, and when I saw that when they won their wild card game, I thought for sure that they were going to retain him based on a 1 point wild card win. And I'm glad that they didn't. Now, you know,
they've got Mike Vrabel.
Vrabel, he's another one out of the New England system, so to speak. So I think he can really improve, obviously, the defense. Who they've got on the offensive side of the ball now?
Offensive coordinator is in Tennessee, Matt LaFleur.
Okay, that's another one of those newer names. See how he improves.
Their defensive coordinator, I was under the impression he was retiring as Dean Pease. I thought he was retiring, but evidently going from Dick LeBeau to him may not be. I don't know how it's going to work. I like Dick LeBeau. The next team we got is a team starting fresh with coordinators, and that's Kansas City with Andy Reid. B minus, just because simply they dropped off where I thought, especially whenever we started our fantasy football season, I had Kansas City as one of my two defenses, and I thought this team was going to be better than what they were.
Yeah, they definitely started hot and then dipped off at the end and then managed to get it back together just enough to win the division. It's just their performance in their playoff game was not real great. I have a feeling I like Andy Reid. Andy Reid is a long-time established head coach in this league, and that's hard to do. I just don't think he's got it anymore. I don't think he's got what it needs to have. Maybe he never had it, especially when he was in Philly and they played in all those NFC Championship games and could never get there. But he definitely taught his protege, or at least showed his protege what not to do.
Next up, when you talk about stability at head coach, the next team probably has more stability at head coach in the last 40 years than any other team, and that's Pittsburgh. 11-5 to 13-3. I gave them a B plus because they weren't as good as I expected them to be. But considering the fact that in my lifetime they're only on their third coach, and for you, that's probably their second coach.
Yeah, this is the second one.
And that's what I like about Pittsburgh. Unlike most teams, Bill Cowher had bad years. He had good years. Tomlin's had bad years. He's had good years. They don't fire their head coach simply because, oh, we got a problem. You got one of the top, I'd say top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL right now on your team. You got great players around him. They took Joe Hayden from Cleveland and turned him into pretty much a all-pro defensive back.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, that's been their MO. Some stability, and with Big Ben performing at a high level again this year, they were pretty unbeatable. Obviously, the divisional round game against Jacksonville leaves a bad taste in their mouth. I don't think that they played very disciplined
Or aggressive.
Yeah, they're not the team that you're going to look at and go, this team is, this is kind of the antithesis to New England. New England is all about, get in there, do your job. This is what you're supposed to do here, here, and here. Pittsburgh's one of those is like, go make plays, make something happen. And yeah, that leads to Big Ben turning over the ball more and stuff like that. But it also leads to those crazy catches by Brown. It really, I think it makes the team tighter that way. But obviously the drama with James Harrison, when he obviously going to New England, I think they're very happy New England did not win the Super Bowl now because of that. And of course the catch in the New England game obviously still is a bad taste. Do you think that they play in the Super Bowl if they have home field advantage?
I think it would have helped, but at the same time, they still would have had to play either New England or Jacksonville, and I don't think they get past either one of those because Jacksonville just they were the AFC version of the Eagles this year. They were the team nobody expected to get this far, and with and instead of just skipping over, we'll just group Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, and New England together. But New England, to me, was an A- team this year. Jacksonville, an A. Because New England had all the components that they always do, except Edelman, I believe it was.
Yeah, Edelman was down
and
early in the season.
To me, I think had they had Edelman, we might be talking about yet another New England Super Bowl win because that was just a key component. It didn't help they lost Gronk. That kind of just thinned them out even further than what they were. But I think, in all honesty, I think the top 3 teams from the AFC from 2017 are probably going to be the teams to watch out for next year with Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, and New England are going to be the top 3. Depending on where we go from this whole Josh McDaniels, Belichick deal, a lot of people keep saying the second Brady retires, Belichick retires, New England's going to drop off. But I don't see Bill Belichick just packing up his office and leaving. I see him staying on as GM, giving his next head coach, which from a lot of reports, it's not guaranteed McDaniels is going to be the head coach, but I don't see why New England's going to just jump off a cliff. They may do a slow decline, but they'll bounce back. It's just which team between Buffalo, Jets, and Dolphins are going to be the hungriest to capitalize on it.
And I think that's what Robert Kraft's trying to set it up for an easy transition to someone he can trust. And I think Bill Belichick in the front office, focusing on a front office role, would work. But I also believe they have a lot of people in the front office that could work if he's not there. They have several people that other teams have tried to poach for GM positions that they've denied access to. So I think even if Bill Belichick retires, be it at the end of next season or the next, the transition to Josh McDaniels will be very smooth. Now, whether his performance as a head coach will back that up, I don't know. But I think it really sets them up for long term. The only move that didn't make sense setting them up for the long term was shipping out Garoppolo. But maybe they have their eyes on someone else, or maybe they think Brady's going to play for several more years where they can develop another quarterback.
Okay, we covered that. Next up, I wanted to look at first-time head coaches. There's 5 new coaches. We don't know who number 6 is going to be.
Obviously.
But it looks like we may have another first-time coach, depending on who they go after. That's probably going to factor into whatever grade I give them next year with the Colts. But the 4 first-time coaches we have are Matt Nagy in Chicago, Steve Wilkes in Arizona, Matt Patricia in Detroit, and Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. The thing on here that I notice is only one of these guys have had any head coach experience at all. Steve Wilkes was head coach at Savannah State and went 5-6 in one season. But if you look at their histories as coaches, I think Matt Patricia him and Vrabel have the shortest list. Patricia was a grad assistant in 96, defensive line coach in 99 and 2000. The interesting part on him is he was an offensive grad assistant at Syracuse for 2 years. So he knows some of both sides of the ball, kind of like Josh McDaniels with New England. He's got that experience on both sides of the ball too. But he's not on our head coach list. Then Patricia spent the last 13 years studying under Bill Belichick. He was offensive assistant for a year, assistant offensive line coach the following year. Then he moved to linebacker coach for 4 years, safeties coach for 1 year, and then spent from 2012 to last year as defensive coordinator. Good history for him. With Vrabel, from 97 to 2010, he played in the NFL. 3 years with the Steelers, 7 with the Patriots, 2 with the Chiefs. Then he was linebacker coach for a year, 2 years defensive line at Ohio State, before he jumped to Houston, where he was linebacker coach and defensive coordinator. So he's got the history. With Matt Nagy, here's another one. Him and Wilkes both have the same history. They're arena football players. Wilkes with the Carolina Cobras, Nagy with New York Dragons, the Carolina Cobras. I got it wrong. Wilkes was with the Charlotte Rage. They weren't as big a team. But Nagy's had a history at quarterback, so he knows his deal. He was an intern with the Eagles, coach's assistant with the Eagles, offensive quality control coach. Then he went from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator with the Chiefs. Then you got Wilkes, Johnson C. Smith, defensive coordinator, moved to Savannah State, eventually head coach. Then he went from Illinois State, Appalachian State as defensive back coach, defensive coordinator at East Tennessee, defensive back coach at Bowling Green and Notre Dame, secondary coach with Washington, University of Washington. Then he spent defensive back jobs, 3 years with the Bears, 3 years with the Chargers. Then he came to Carolina, where he was defensive coordinator last year, so he's probably got the least amount of accolades of any of the 4. But curious thing, which one of those 4 has the most success, and which one will be the first one to get fired out of the four?
Well, I think the most immediate success will be Matt Patricia in Detroit. I mean, obviously, they've already got an offense kind of put together. They need to work on the running game, but he's there to fix that defense. And I think if he fixes that defense, you've got another NFC North team just that's a threat. Another coach that could have a lot of immediate success would be Nagy in Chicago. They've obviously brought him in for Trubinsky. Obviously brought him in to try to grow him as a quarterback. But I think out of all the four names that they all will have some pretty good success. The first one to be fired. Run down the names again.
Nagy in Chicago, Wilkes in Arizona, Patricia in Detroit, and Vrabel in Tennessee. I know the least patient ownership of the four has to be Tennessee.
That's what I was about to say. I think Vrabel and Tennessee, I don't know if they'll mesh together real well. And if they don't, I think he might be the first one out the door. He could have success, but I think
I got to go with Wilkes.
you got to go with Wilkes.
Because
There's still a big question in Arizona about the quarterback.
out of the four, they've got the least certain quarterback.
Yeah, and
future.
unfortunately that ties in a lot with your longevity as a head coach, is if you have a franchise quarterback.
Now, he's not a first-time head coach, but he was an ex-Browns head coach. Is Pat Shurmur. I think his biggest problem is you got to find a successor to Eli.
Mm-hmm.
You can't let happen what happened in Denver when Peyton retired and you have that whole fiasco of we don't have a quarterback now.
Oh yeah, and Denver definitely just sold out on winning the Super Bowl, but then they mishandled Brock Osweiler, which I mean now we look back and I'm sure Denver fans are happy they mishandled that, but with New York you've got to find a successor to Eli. There is no way around it. Eli is on the back nine of his career, probably deep into the back nine of his career. And there's just so many questions about that team. And I think Pat Shurmur will do fine with the media. That's always the question about New York, is how they're going to deal with the New York media. But there's a lot of questions.
Now, I think even though this is the not-so-neutral zone, this isn't our racing one, we're going to skip over our special topic we were going to have for tonight, and we'll just kind of, I guess, next week we can use it as kind of like a launching for the show. But before we cut out, I want to cover, because next week we'll cover that football topic and our coaching staffs, where we think the coaches are going to be. But before we go, I want to hit the preview for our NASCAR and NHRA season, because NASCAR is getting ready to kick off right now while we're recording. They're out in California in NHRA, and they're kicking off their season opener after what I think was one of the biggest meltdowns of anybody for losing a championship, worse than Brady not shaking Foles' hand. When the guy who finished second place in the championship and top fuel for NHRA decides he wants to say that the point system is BS because he got beat from behind, kind of like what the Eagles did to the Patriots. But we've got the first female top fuel drag racing champion since the 80s with Shirley Medallion and John Force's daughter Brittany. His son-in-law wins the funny car. Pro Stock gets their first time with Bo Butner, and Motorcycle gets yet another championship to the Harley guys. I know you're probably more of a NASCAR guy than drag racing, but we'll try to get that changed this year. Who do you think has the best shot of unseating Martin Truex Jr. and taking the championship this year?
Oh, that's
first time champ, not an established champ, because I know Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick and Brad Keselowski are always on that list. I'm thinking Larson.
That's what I was about to say. Larson had a great season last year.
But just like some of the NFL teams did, that 42 team had the wrong time of year for them to have that bad luck hit. And when you got Jimmy Johnson, who is, and hit that 48 team are like the New England Patriots of NASCAR. Don't let them in the playoffs, or else they're going to come after you. Just Truex happened to be that Philadelphia Eagles team this year. He just managed to understand how to get the points in stages, get those bonus points for the playoffs, and it just clicked.
Oh yeah, he drove his wheels off last year, winning stages left and right. He went into the chase with a mountain of points, and it was impressive. But yeah, Larson's definitely going to have to make some strides. But there's other drivers out there that could make some waves as well.
The one thing that concerns me is the future in racing. NASCAR's Cup Series, they're doing good. To me, there's no real big star in the Xfinity or Truck Series that, you got Elliott Sadler in the Xfinity and Matt Crafton in trucks, but it's starting to look like it's a young man's game in those series. And to me, I don't see a real favorite for either one of the championships.
Yeah, if there's any real outstanding talent, normally it gets on the fast track to the Cup Series. They're snatching up young drivers left and right, with a lot of the older drivers deciding to step down. But it's very much a young man's game now.
Trying to think of is there anything else? Okay, there you go. Who becomes the big name now? Dale Earnhardt Jr. is gone.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time since, I think, the 80s, Bill Elliott and Dale Earnhardt Jr., who are the longest two-run and most popular drivers, we have no most popular driver now. There's no real clear-cut favorite to go, here's the guy. Here's the guy that's going to be the one. Is it Chase Elliott? I mean, his dad was one of the most popular guys.
I don't know. It's going to have to, obviously the fans, they don't like certain drivers. So I think it'll be somebody that... I think it'll be a name that's newer to the sport. There's, Earnhardt was popular because of his dad, obviously. A talented driver himself, but he definitely got a boost from that name. So somebody else is gonna have to build up their brand from the ground up to become that fan favorite. And, we'll probably see by the time we get around to the All-Star race and who wins that fan vote. When they announce the fan vote standings, like the votes they got, I think it'll be a lot more even playing field than it being Danica Patrick and Earnhardt Jr. like it had been.
Here's another interesting thing about the Cup Series. Can Chase Elliott break that cycle that you see with so many generational drivers? You had the 7-time champ, Richard Petty. His son, Kyle Petty. Kyle won a couple races, but he was never that big name. He's going to win a championship. Same with Junior. He didn't get that championship. Chase Elliott is now that guy that's got that weight on his shoulder. Can he win a championship like Dad did? And is it going to be a surprise winner of the Daytona 500, or do we get a repeat? Because it's been a while since the Cup champion won the Daytona 500. I think you got to go back to Jimmy Johnson. I think was the last guy to do it. And will this be the year Jimmy breaks the 3-way tie and becomes 8-time champ?
I don't think so. I think he's getting
To the
getting
peak.
older. I think he's past his peak. Could he do it? Oh yeah, he could do it. Do I think he does it? No. I think there's just too much young talent and new drivers. So many changes going on.
Got anything else?
No, I think that's it for tonight.
I think we may tackle that extra topic there and the coaching, or we may just hit that topic and then jump straight into racing, because the ARCA race was tonight. Tomorrow's the Advanced Auto Parts Clash, and then
Yeah, definitely have a lot of material to cover next week.
well, I think that's gonna do it for me.
Yep.
Send us on out, Jacob. Draven Sports.
All right, be sure to visit us on Facebook at Draven Sports page. And this is Jacob and David signing out.
Y'all be good.